As we see in this week's Torah portion, we are introduced to an unusual arrangement. We see a prophet who doesn't really see the angel of God, and we have another issue. It's not Shrek, but it was the first time that there was a talking donkey on this planet who decided to turn around and look at his master and say, "I'm not going for her, there's an angel in the place, and we can't move." And what do you think Balaam wanted to do? Well, of course, he did what any donkey owner would. He impatiently jabbed at the donkey aside and he prodded him forward. And he said, "When the donkey now says the angel of the Lord, it lay down under Balaam." And Balaam was furious. And he then went ahead and just beat the donkey with the stick, because poking it and prodding it and being impatient and yelling at it necessitated him beating it with the stick, because the donkey saw something that Balaam didn't. And what does that actually mean when we have a magical creature that can see something that the human couldn't see? In my mind, it kind of reminds us that there are times that we all bear witness to the fact that somebody in the room sees something that everybody else around us just simply doesn't want to see. They don't want to acknowledge. They're really happy to pretend it's not even there. And they sit in this river of denial, pretending as if it's not. And so what is it that a leader is supposed to do? Well, let's see. According to Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, there's a delicate balance between seeing the world as it is and seeing the world as it should be or could be. He writes, "A leader must have a vision but a realism. He or she must think of the impossible but believe in the possible." Well, I think in a way that applies to so many of our lives. We kind of limit ourselves by imagining what the world is. It's only what we experience, after all. And frequently, we don't have the imagination to go beyond. For me, for instance, I have to admit, anti-Semitism, something that I knew existed. Obviously, if I've experienced it, I've had friends who experienced it, but even in that, I was happy to other it over there. I didn't want to admit it was in front of me. The White House announces a new initiative to combat it. The ADL talks about it's increasing, but the truth is, I didn't want to see it. I was happy to be the donkey. I was not happy to be the donkey. I was happy to be the prophet. Forgive me, I'm the wrong person in the metaphor. And just kind of stand there, even though everybody was pointing it out. Though there was always a part of me that did believe it to exist, believe it to be around, as I was reminded in Kiddush Club earlier tonight by Betty. When I first came here, I wanted to have a meeting with the sheriff to make sure that I had a relationship going in case there was a moment of anti-Semitism. But even in making that meeting happen, I still had doubt that it was necessary. And I wonder, how much of that doubt, how much is that hope, how much is that just wanting the world to be as we think it could or should be, not necessarily acknowledging what is? And what was so special about the magical donkey after all, that made the donkey able to see everything in front of him, able specifically to see the angel in front of him? The donkey had vision. He had clear vision. He was accepting even of things that, well, he didn't want to be accepting of. He was accepting that, well, the world is not always as wonderful and full of roses as we want it to be, because there are people sometimes who are a little bit broken. And unfortunately, they didn't deal with their brokenness in a way that would be appropriate. They didn't do the hard, heavy, patient work of healing themselves. They allowed their fractured self to push out into the world and negatively impact those around them. It reminds me also of a story. And I want to share with you a brief midrash about a king who had a diamond. And he loved this stone. It was a beautiful stone. He looked at it, he admired it. And one day when he was looking at the stone, he saw a scratch inside of it. Now, he believed that scratch had never been there before. His advisors assured him that had always been there. He just thought it was a perfect diamond, and so he never saw it. And then he went on to try and believe that it was so flawed. And he tried and did all sorts of things to try to fix the diamond. In the end, he came to the realization that he can focus on the crack in the diamond and believe that it's no longer as beautiful as it was. Or he can put a little bit of gold and fill it in and make it more beautiful than it ever was and turn it into some flower, which is what he ended up doing. All of us have pain. All of us have experienced pain. Some of us were so pained by what happened last week that we feel it as a deep fracture. And we don't know, do we go back and stick our heads back in the sand and pretend that there's no trauma and anti-Semitism before? Do we deny that it exists? And then we have to ask the next question. If we're not going to deny that it exists, if we're going to accept it as a reality, how are we going to go forward? What meaning will we make of it? How can we choose to continue to embrace the world with kindness? When we look at the readings that I offered this evening, you'll see there's a theme of choosing kindness, choosing to make that crack, choosing to make that pain a flower, choosing to be a light to others, choosing to bring that light out to other people, choosing to share those flowers with others, choosing to allow it to make us more sensitive to the pain that others experience, recognizing that we are not the only people who have been heard, discriminated against, or faced intolerance. Rather, in our society today, that is spread throughout. It is spread toward the trans community, the LGBT community, people of color, and us as well. Our plight is theirs and theirs is ours. It is up to us to choose to make that crack a flower so that we can be kind to them and make a community of peace and love. May last week's event, which has churned all of you up here, churn you up again. May it invite all of you to be ambassadors of kindness and light out into the community. May it inspire you to say, when I see intolerance, when I hear an ugly word, when I see somebody even in engaging in a slight measure of injustice, I'm going to speak out. And maybe it will push you to not just speak out when you see it, but to be proactive in attempting to prevent it. May we not let last week, which is an opportunity, pass us by to make a choice toward kindness.